Section 26. A storm on the mountain. The idea had been his, one last hike before autumn settled in, a trail that wound high into the mountains, promising views that would steal their breath. And for hours it was perfect. Sunlight filtering through golden leaves, the hush of pine needles underfoot, laughter echoing down the winding path. But by late afternoon the sky had darkened, clouds boiling like smoke over the peaks. The wind picked up, sharp and cold, whipping Emma's hair into her eyes. "James," she called, unease curling in her gut. He glanced back, reading the fear on her face. "We'll find shelter," he said, his tone calm but quick. Rain came first, a cold, slanting sheet that drenched them in seconds. Then the thunder, rolling like distant drums, and the crack of lightning splitting the sky. They stumbled upon an old ranger cabin, its door sagging but its roof blessedly intact. Inside, the air was damp and musty, but it was dry, and that was enough. Emma shivered in her soaked clothes, teeth chattering. James rummaged through his pack, pulling out a thin blanket and wrapping it around her shoulders. "Come here," he murmured, drawing her close, his arms a wall of heat against the storm's fury. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "No, you're not," he said softly, pressing his lips to her temple. "But you will be." Outside, the storm raged on, hurling wind and rain against the walls. Inside, time slowed to the rhythm of two hearts beating close, of hands twined together, of a love that felt like a light against the dark. Section 27. Autumn's Whisper. The valley flamed with colour, crimson and gold spilling down the hillsides, the lake cradling the fire of the trees in its mirrored depths. The café bustled with life, laughter mingling with the clink of mugs and the hum of soft music. Emma loved this season, the way the air tasted crisp and new, the way evenings curled warm around candlelight. But even amid the golden calm, something stirred in her, a sense of waiting, of something about to change. James had been quieter lately, his gaze distant at times, as if he carried a secret in his pocket like a stone. When she asked, he only smiled and kissed her forehead, and for now she let it be. One evening after closing, they sat on the porch, mugs steaming in their hands, the sunset painting the sky in strokes of rose and amber. "Do you ever think about what's next?" she asked softly. James's lips curved, but his eyes held a glint she couldn't read. "Every day," he said, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, lingering just a moment longer than usual. Section 28. The Secret in the Drawer. She found it by accident, a small velvet box tucked into the back of the drawer in his workshop, hidden beneath coils of twine and spare screws. Emma froze, her breath snagging in her chest. Her fingers hovered, trembling, before she finally eased it open. Inside, the ring gleamed softly in the dim light, a simple band crowned with a diamond that caught the glow and fractured it into 1,000 tiny stars. Emma closed the box with shaking hands, her heart pounding wild and sweet and terrified all at once. She slipped it back where she'd found it, her mind spinning. When James walked in moments later, dusting sawdust from his palms, she forced a smile, her pulse roaring in her ears. "Everything okay?" he asked, his gaze sharp on hers. "Fine," she lied, the secret burning like a lantern between them. Section 29. Winter Lights. Snow came early that year, draping the world in white, muffling the streets in a hush of wonder. The village square glittered under strings of lights, lanterns swinging gently in the frosty breeze. James led her through the crowd, his hand warm around hers, his eyes alight with something she still couldn't name. Music floated on the air, sweet and slow, wrapping the night in ribbons of sound. "Where are we going?" she asked, laughing as he tugged her past the stalls, past the dancers twirling in loops of colour. "You'll see," he said, his smile quick and secret. They stopped at the edge of the lake, where 100 lanterns bobbed like fallen stars on the water's glassy skin. James turned to her, his breath a cloud in the starlight, his hands closing over hers. "Emma," he said softly, and her heart tripped hard against her ribs. "From the moment you came back, I've known, I don't ever want to let you go again." And then he dropped to one knee, the velvet box opening in his palm like a promise. Emma's vision blurred with tears, the lights shimmering through the veil of them as she whispered the only word that mattered. "Yes." The crowd behind them erupted in cheers, lanterns lifting into the night like 1,000 glowing prayers. And as James slid the ring onto her finger, Emma felt it, the steady, unshakable truth of it all. Home wasn't a place, it was this, him, them, forever. Section 30, Winter Wedding Dreams. The morning after the proposal, Emma woke with sunlight pooling across the quilt and a smile curled like a secret on her lips. The ring glinted on her hand, catching the golden glow that filtered through the curtains. For a long, still moment she just stared at it, her heart full to the brim, as if she could drink the feeling and never run dry. Downstairs, the smell of coffee curled through the air, rich and familiar. Emma padded into the kitchen, hair tumbling loose over her shoulders, and found James standing by the stove, spatula in hand, humming under his breath. "Good morning, fiancé," he said without turning, his voice lazy and warm like honey. Emma laughed, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. "Say it again," she murmured against his back. He turned in her arms, his smile bright and boyish. "Good morning, fiancé." He kissed her forehead, her nose, the corner of her mouth until she was laughing breathlessly, pressing her face against his chest. They ate breakfast side by side, knees touching under the table, trading ideas like sparks about flowers and vows, and where they'd string the lanterns when the night fell soft and silver over the lake. Emma sketched little hearts in the margin of her notebook, as James scrawled lists in his sharp, practical hand. "It doesn't have to be big," she said, glancing up at him. "Just ours." James reached across the table, curling his fingers over hers. "Emma," he said, his voice low and certain, "as long as it's you, it's everything." Her throat ached, and she leaned forward to kiss him, tasting coffee and forever on his lips. Section 31, Threads of White. The days slid by in a flurry of planning, each one dusted with laughter and the hush of falling snow. Emma spent afternoons hunched over bolts of fabric with Rose, her best friend since childhood, whose quick wit and endless patience turned chaos into calm. "This one," Rose said one afternoon, holding up a swath of satin that shimmered like moonlight. "It's you, Emma, simple, elegant, timeless." Emma brushed her fingers over the fabric, her chest tightening with something tender and new. She'd never been the girl who dreamed of gowns and veils, but now, standing in the golden hush of Rose's shop with snow spiraling past the windows, the vision bloomed bright and sure inside her. When she stepped out of the fitting room in the finished dress days later, James was waiting, eyes widening, breath catching like a man staring straight into a miracle. His voice faltered, broke. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hands trembling as they hovered near her waist without touching. "Emma, you're everything I ever wanted." And when he finally kissed her, slow and reverent, the world fell quiet around them, the snow whispering secrets against the glass. Section 32, Lantern Strings and Midnight Laughter. The night before the wedding, the lake shimmered under a spill of stars, lanterns strung in looping arcs from tree to tree, their glow pooling gold on the snow. Friends and neighbours bustled through the cafe, laughter and music weaving through the air like silk. Emma stood near the window, cheeks flushed, heart light as spun sugar, watching the reflection of all she loved ripple in the glass. Behind her, James slipped his arms around her waist, his chin settling on her shoulder. "Cold," he murmured, his breath fanning warm across her skin. "Only a little," she said, leaning back into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Tomorrow," he whispered. Emma closed her eyes, the word sinking into her bones like warmth. Tomorrow. Section 33, The Wedding by the Lake. Snow drifted soft as petals, the lake a sheet of silver under the pale winter sun. Guests huddled in coats and scarves, their faces bright with smiles as the music began, a gentle swell that carried through the still air like a blessing. Emma walked toward James on a path lined with lanterns, their flames flickering gold against the white. Her dress whispered over the snow, and with each step the world narrowed to him, his eyes dark and shining, his smile breaking like dawn. When she reached him, his hands closed over hers, warm and sure. For a breathless moment they just looked at each other, everything else falling away. The vows came easy, rising straight from the marrow of their hearts. No grand promises, no gilded words, just truth, simple and steadfast as the earth beneath their feet. "I will love you," Emma whispered, her voice trembling like the lantern flames. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after." "And I'll be yours," James said, his voice thick, his eyes locked on hers. "Always." When their lips met, the world seemed to hold its breath. Snow kissed their cheeks, lanterns glowed like captured stars, and the lake cradled their reflection in its FR.